with all the different elements. But real quick about myself, I moved here 8 years ago. I worked for the University of California, Santa Cruz for the Theater Arts Department. And I basically left my job to move here to create a specific platform for arts, culture, health, the environment, peace and justice, and some science and tech issues that are so abundant and prevalent in this county. I mean, you guys agree, this is just an amazing area like really nowhere else in the world. So 15 months ago, I started the Golden Road Radio Show. I'm also a broadcaster at KVMR. We did 3 shows at the historic Nevada Theater. It was a great success. Over those 3 shows, we had 50 different presenters of individuals, organizations, and performers. It was kind of like Nevada County's version of Prairie Home Companion meets TED Talks. So a little bit nerdy and heady and scientific, but also lots of fun with music and featuring a lot of the entertainers from the community. Since then, we broadcast the show every Sunday from 6 to 8 p.m. live on the internet, on YouTube, on Facebook, and other platforms like Vimeo and Ustream. After the show is done, we take that content and we send it out to 10 counties, to their cable stations: Nevada County, Placer County, Tahoe Truckee, Calaveras Amador, Butte County, where Chico's located. We just recently added Shasta County and Siskiyou County, and soon we're going to add Plumas and Tuolumne County. And we are broadcasting also in Sacramento County. So for those of you who might have seen California Gold and the entertaining but, semi-culturally naive Huell Hauser, we're trying to raise the bar to just give the community an opportunity to have the amazing individuals and organizations here spotlighted, focused on, and to get the knowledge and the information that is so prevalent and so rich here in our community out to the world. Because I think without looking too far, I mean, even with the recent fires, the hurricanes in Puerto Rico and Texas, what's happening with microplastic, what's happening with food and water security and emergency preparedness, that there's a lot of issues that affect not just our quality of life, but forbid there should be some sort of natural disaster. What do we do? Where do we go? Who can we contact around things like health, again, food and water security? So this is our first of what we're looking at as doing a every couple months a local forum here at the Digital Media Center in conjunction with NCTV. And lots of other folks who have been involved. So I'm not going to talk any longer, but I'm very happy and proud of what the show's become. In 14 months, we've had over 30 episodes. We've broadcast from 5 different counties live, and today is just one of a whole fall tour of these community resilient building events that we're doing. We're going to be next week in Mount Shasta, working with the Board of Supervisors and the Forest Service and the Native community there. And the next week we'll be in Chico. So there's a lot that we've done, 160 individuals and organizations in the last year, and it's all archived on YouTube. So you can go there and check it out, but I just wanted to let you know that besides our incredible cornerstone of KVMR, which really is a flagship of independent media, besides all the social media that all of us use, and I enjoy lots of Renette Senham's post, bringing a lot of awareness to our community of things that are happening. It's been a really great honor to be here and to serve the community. And I'd just like to recognize other people that I've been working with, Sherry Brickler, who's going to be performing later, because the arts are a very important economic driver of the success of our community. And our moderator this afternoon, who was very instrumental in helping to bring a very educated and high-level panel of individuals and professionals here to the space to talk a little bit more about community resiliency. And on that, I'm going to introduce Poyom, and I just want to also thank deeply anything I ever do. The first piece is always invitation to the local Native community. If we don't engage and give that space for the local community. It's just another kind of expression of our colonial ideals. So I'm very happy and honored that we could have Shelley Covert here today. So thank you. So Payom Riles.
I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks, Michael. I'm excited to introduce everyone here. First, let me welcome Shelley Covert up to represent our the Native culture that's been here for thousands and thousands of years.
Awesome. Homakani, thank you. I'm Shelley Covert, and I'm the Tribal Council Secretary and spokesperson for the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe. And so, yes, my family has been here for countless generations. I was actually somebody asked what generation I was, and on paper documentation, we have 8 generations back from my daughter. And but then the oral history goes on back long before that. So yeah, we've been here a long time, and I love this topic about community resiliency. I think it needs to be at the heart of everything we do together in this community. To a friend of mine, night before last, we were on an art panel, and I was working with her in her project that's called Belonging. And so we've had some really heartfelt interviews together about what is belonging and what does it mean, place-based belonging. And I came to a hard realization through those conversations that we belong to the land. We've been here for so long that, you know, it's like our DNA is connected here. And not a whole lot of variety. We didn't go, you know, I always think, where am I going to go? You know, I'll always be here. But we're not necessarily connected and belong as a tribal unit in our community. We're not a vibrant piece that's active and seen and of value in our community. And she had said that communities really, if we look at each other and we can see the strong ones and the ones who maybe aren't so strong, or the ones who are falling down, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So, you know, who can you grab by the arm and pull along with you? I feel that that's what I do. I do a lot in my family. You know, we pull each other along or slap each other upside the head if you're getting too emotional about things. And but that really is a beautiful sentiment. That we are as strong as our weakest links in our community. And who are those who need our help? And how can we prosper together? Another thing in that line of thinking is I constantly try to think about my grandparents and the way that they were as people. And they had a lot of personal responsibility. My grandma used to keep this little tiny, it was like a pencil jar. It was her trash can. And she'd cut things up really small, and just like she was so conscientious of her waste as a person. And it was really important to her that she managed her own garbage. And everything was always smashed and flattened, and she was responsible because they used to live out in the woods where there were predators. And of course, if there were food things, you know, it was dangerous to have that kind of waste near where you were living. But on a level of personal responsibility to each other in the community, what is our responsibility to the land? And you know, if we're all going to be here together today, of course, we're not only Nisenan people, you know, a specific group of people who've been here all that time. We're a new community that's constantly building and changing. So to keep those community values, what are they? And how can we commit and really give responsibility to the land? Promise it something. We promise to be here. We promise to take care of those who are in need, and we promise to each other to take care of the animals and the plants and the water. We're having these water issues, of course, and the forest fires, as you guys had talked about. You know, traditionally we burned so that those catastrophic fires didn't happen, and we burned for to keep the plant materials extremely pliable and bendable, and it kept all the bugs out of the acorn harvest when they fell. And there's so much to the burning and that traditional knowledge that is starting to pop back up, I think, into the greater community. But how can we together, commit to this place and really make it the best it can be? And how can we commit to one another as this new, thriving, ever-changing community of people? So that really, I love this topic of community resiliency. And I do see, I don't naively think there aren't oppressed people or people who really, really are having a hard time being part of the community. That's the truth. So to look at those populations and really shine light on them so that they can come up and share and be part of the community, I think is really important, and especially important for the Nisenan people here. I always feel like I'm, dragging people out or in an almost disrespectful way, asking my mom and my elders to talk about some of these things are really difficult. There's a lot of pain and suffering that goes on, and I don't mean to laugh. It's just, it's really, they're deep topics. But I think as a strong community, we can talk about these things together and really, what are our values here as a community, and how can we each contribute to that and take care of each other again. So that's all. I don't want to take too much time, but Ekwa, thank you.
Well, thank you, Shelley. Thanks, Michael. And thank everybody for coming. I'll speak a little bit about myself and who I am and why I think we're here. My name's Poyam Riles. Michael introduced me earlier. I'm a civil engineer. I work for Stantec Consulting, and I do water resources engineering. And when Michael told me about this series of events that he wanted to do, I was excited because I'm interested in building resiliency, and I do work around that in my profession. Before I go on to talk about my profession and how that relates to my profession, let me first discuss what we mean. What do I mean when I say resiliency? What does that word mean? Resiliency is the ability for something, a system or an individual, to regain function after a catastrophic event or some kind of stressor. A good analogy that I like to use is if you have a leaf. If you have a leaf that's fallen from the tree and it's a dried leaf and you crush it in your hand, the leaf will be destroyed. That stressor will destroy the leaf. You open your hand and it's gone. If you have a green leaf from the same tree that still has all its cellular functions intact and you crush that leaf in your hand, it will not be destroyed. It'll still be there. So the green leaf is resilient and the dried leaf is brittle. So that gives some idea of what we're talking about. It's a buzzword that's being used. I see it being used more and more around here, like sustainability or green or regenerative. Sometimes people talk about regenerative economy or regenerative agriculture. And these words are used to communicate broad concepts in a very concise way. Resiliency may have a slightly different meaning from some of these other words, but depending on the context, it may not. It may be used, could be used interchangeably, or there may be overlap between these meanings. In my field, almost always when someone brings up the topic of resiliency, it has to do with infrastructure. And usually it has to do with climate change as well. So this resilient infrastructure that I usually deal with, it could be typically what you think of as infrastructure as gray or hard infrastructure, or it could be green, like soft infrastructure. And some examples of that, what we build this resilient infrastructure could be for sea level rise, it could be flooding, it could be drought. So for sea level rise, some gray infrastructure that a community might build is a seawall to protect against storm surge. Some green infrastructure they might build would be like beach augmentation, to adding sand to the beach to protect against storm surge. For drought, a community might want to build a water recycling system where they have a pipe network that recycles, that you have a treatment plant that treats the water to a level where it can be used for agriculture or for landscaping, or even if it's potable reuse. And they have to build infrastructure to deliver that system. You can't put the recycled water, especially if it's not potable, you can't put it in the regular water system. So that's infrastructure, gray, hard infrastructure that has to be built and installed. For a drought, you could also just increase the level of groundwater recharge if you're flooding agricultural fields or orchards or something like that to store the water in the ground. You already have a well that you take the water out of the ground. You're just using that natural infrastructure to improve your water security. For flooding, it's similar. For green infrastructure, maybe you're removing levees and increasing the floodplain and doing floodplain restoration to allow the flood someplace to go. Or you could also do harder infrastructure where there's levees or flood walls that protect the community. Or you could build rain catchment systems underneath parking lots or structures so that water can be stored instead of running off and causing the flooding. Those are just a few examples. Often, these solutions are not simple, and they're not one or the other or straightforward. There's a mix of the two, but it's always really critical that the solutions are delivered and designed with a scientific basis, with some kind of verifiable basis behind it, because it doesn't matter if you think it sounds good or if it just makes people feel safe. They have to work, right? These systems, at the end of the day, they have to work. I only become famous if it doesn't work. If it works fine, nobody thinks about who put it there. So I'm heartened to see, though, that over the last few years, more and more, we see that these solutions are working with nature to provide more holistic and integrated systems-level solutions. And I believe that this trend is continuing. More and more, you see people doing research on what are the benefits of having trees in cities, what are the benefits of having rain gardens in the cities, what are the benefits of doing floodplain restoration as opposed to just having levees. And I hope that humans will eventually remember that we are, in fact, part of nature and that we're part of this global system that all works together. Even the things that we build, our cell phones, are part of nature. People have a hard time accepting that, but if we really get down to what is nature, anyway, I won't go farther with that. But at my firm, where I work, we're very clear that we are in the business of finding solutions for communities. That's one of our sort of driving goals. And this is always complex, and it involves a lot of different factors. The economics of what the community can afford, the environmental constraints that might be in that area, the existing infrastructure that might already be there that has to be integrated, cultural values around that infrastructure. Will the infrastructure be used properly? Will it be maintained properly? And this goes for all kinds of infrastructure, even the natural infrastructure or watershed meadow restoration. Will it be maintained? Will people understand the importance? So when we talk about community resilience, it becomes even more broad. What are the nodes and connections in a community that make it resilient against all kinds of catastrophic events? Fire, flood, earthquake, dam break, drought, mass migration. I could go on and on. Even events that we can't even imagine might happen. How do we prepare for that? So we're talking about more than just infrastructure, clearly. And that's why, for this event, we've brought all of these people here. I don't have all the solutions. So we've brought people here to speak about what are different solutions that have made our community resilient. We're really lucky to live in a place with so many people doing so much incredible work. Already we live in a community that's quite resilient. And so before I finish, I'd like to say, with the advent of social media, there are very strong divisions in our communities that may have already been there, but maybe social media is exacerbating those divisions. And it's my hope that this concept of building resilient communities is something that people of all different sort of belief systems can get behind. that we can use that concept to educate and bring awareness around ideas that will make resilient communities, and that we can bring different communities that maybe have different belief systems or cultural values together, because we can all agree, yes, we want our community to be strong, we want it to work well, and we say, hey, look at this solution that's actually working and is actually, improving our economy or improving our water quality. Then people can get behind that. So with that, let me stop speaking, and I'd like to introduce Brittany Besney from the Sierra Business Council. I'm bringing her up to speak about building resilient economies, but their organization is a great example of how these topics are all interrelated and connected. They do so much great work. So let me introduce Brittany. Thank you.
Thank you, Poyam. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Benessy. I am the Communications Director for Sierra Business Council, and I'm really excited to be here to talk community resilience with you all. For those who don't know, Sierra Business Council is a triple bottom line organization, which means that our work aims to serve the community, the economy, and the environment simultaneously. We are based in Truckee and serve the entire Sierra Nevada region. And I was thinking today, I realized that resilience is really inherent within our mission, that if we were to measure SBC's success 100, 200 years from now, it would be that those three areas, the community, the economy, and the environment, remain strong, fostered integrity and strength within the communities throughout the region. So it feels very right to be here today. We do a lot of great work within within Nevada County, which makes sense because it is our own backyard, starting with the Sierra Small Business Development Center, which actually just opened our second office here in Nevada City. I believe it's actually located right in this building, so keep an eye out for that when you're in Nevada City. What the Sierra SBDC does is we work with businesses and entrepreneurs looking to start their own business, offering free one-on-one consulting for everything from developing the business plan to marketing and social media management, from payroll taxes to IT support. We're really working to help those businesses, small businesses in and around northeastern California, start, grow, and thrive. This year alone, our Sierra SBDC consultant served over 300 clients and helped them to create 78 permanent jobs in northeastern California. So it's something we're very proud of. We also have the Sierra Nevada Geotourism Project, which has been in existence since 2009. We partner with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy and National Geographic to help travelers get off the beaten path. So I think we can all agree that the tourist economy in the Sierra Nevada and in Nevada County in particular has continued to grow and prosper. And so our goal is to help the smaller communities and businesses that are off the beaten path take advantage of the opportunities provided by some of our overly loved destinations like Lake Tahoe, Yosemite, and Mammoth, and help travelers experience the area a little bit more purposefully and through experience rather than just seeing the big hot spots. So our Sierra Nevada Geotourism Map Guide online has nearly 2,000 destinations nominated by locals and those who know the region best to help spread that tourism love and take advantage of the changing economy as travelers continue to come to the region. We also have our Sierra Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Partnership, Sierra Camp, which, as the name suggests, focuses on climate change adaptation and mitigation. We do that by partnering with urban organizations and legislators in Sacramento to find collaborative solutions and ways to decrease the effects of our changing climate. Working to educate our network on issues such as green infrastructure. We just developed a fact sheet that can be seen at sbcsierracamp.org. We also offer workshops in congruence with UC Davis and other academic institutions to kind of model out what is coming down the line for us. And then in Sacramento and beyond, Sierra Camp is working to educate policymakers on the importance of upper watershed management. So keep an eye out as SB5 comes down the line. That could offer more funding for the Sierra Nevada than the region has ever received on a statewide level. So really important to get everyone involved in that, definitely related to resilience. And I think to kind of wrap it up, what SBC has learned in our 23 plus years of existence is that if we hope to move the needle on some of these big issues that we are facing, it really is, and to Poyom's point as well, bringing parties together of different opinions, of different backgrounds, to find where that common ground lies. I think in the last 2 years in particular, we've seen every issue possible polarized, and if we can work to bring people together to get past the polarization and to find the common ground, that is where we're going to be able to find resilience. We're going to be able to really move the needle and tackle these issues. So I look forward to finding the common ground with you all today. Thank you so much.
My next guest is somebody who's worked tirelessly for this community for quite a while. She's been mayor and she's part of the city council, and I think currently she's working to bring more community space into Nevada City that we can enjoy and that can help bring our community together. So let me please welcome Renette Senham.
Thank you, Poyom. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be here. I was just at an Indivisible Women's event a couple hours ago, and I was just speaking to women leadership and why women make really good leaders. And one of the things that women are really good at is listening. And though I do have a loud voice that many of you know about, first and foremost, I actually listen. And when I hear what the community is saying, I usually take that as my marching orders. And interestingly enough, in 2007, the Nevada City Chamber of Commerce had done the Great Survey, the Great Nevada City Survey, and they wanted to find out what the community wanted. And some of the things they discovered was they wanted more music in the streets, they wanted more cultural events, and they wanted also more pedestrian-friendly areas in downtown Nevada City. That gave me my cue to pursue something like that, a community gathering place, and the timing was right that out of that survey, and being approached by Angie Tomey, who is a farmer who owns Mountain Bounty with her husband, we created what's called the Nevada City Farmers Market. But it wasn't just about organic produce, even though it was very important, obviously. It was also about making it a community gathering place that also included music. And it was safe for children and families to be as well. Then, over the course of time, we started having some cases over and over again, and we were getting lots of complaints on a little tiny street in Nevada City called Commercial Street off the main drag. And we had groups of individuals who were sitting on the sidewalks and with their dogs and their backpacks, and we considered them more like the subculture, and they seemed intimidating to people, and they were smoking and they were swearing and they were doing all these things, and this went on for decades. First they were on the corner of South Pine and Spring, and then they moved to the Callanan Park, and then they were on Commercial Street on the stoops and the doorsteps, and people were livid. They were stepping over them. But they had the right to be there. We all have the right to be downtown Nevada City, and we didn't have benches until 10 years ago. They took the benches away. So basically, if you weren't shopping, the message was we didn't want you around. Well, at that same time, I was on the city council, I created what was called the sustainability team, and the first parklet in San Francisco went in. And I thought, there's an idea for you. So we decided to take Commercial Street and do something quite radical, and that was to actually give these individuals who are sitting on the stoops and the sidewalks an actual place to sit. So we built this little boardwalk, we call it, this little parklet that's 60 by 8. And we built it off-site for a few weeks with all volunteers. And then one morning at 7 in the morning, we laid that whole thing out and added the planter boxes and the dirt and the plants. And by noon, it was there, completely installed. And those individuals who've been sitting on the stoops and the sidewalks were now sitting on the benches of the boardwalk. And people were saying, well, wait a second. But now they're sitting there. And we were saying, well, wait a second. First, you didn't want to be stepping over on the sidewalk, and now we got a place for them to sit, and now you're mad that they're just there. So one of the things we started to do was we started having more music. I had a big farm-to-table banquet every year for a few years, and we were trying to show the potential of this space, right? What we could do with this commons, this public right-of-way. There's so much more than just cars and parking. Then, last year, as we all know, a year ago, Trump got elected. And the next thing you know, there's a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s saying, oh my God, we've got to do something. What do? We have to get involved somehow. But we don't know how local government works. We don't understand the mechanism. How does it work? I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit down and we're going to start talking. And we're going to figure out a project that you guys want to do, a physical project. And what I'll do is I'll mentor you through the whole entire process, whether it's planning and public workshops, and if you have to rezone, whatever it takes, right? And get the city to approve it, and then actually implement the whole entire project. And they were looking originally at maybe a tiny house village. And they realized it was a little bit more than they wanted to chew, bite off and chew. So they actually took their cue from a event that happened last summer called the Yuba Village Building Convergence that closed down Commercial Street, right where the boardwalk is, and they were talking about the whole concept of a town square. And a town square concept has been mulling about for quite a few decades, a pedestrian-friendly, carless street. We've been talking about this for a long time. So they said, you know what, we would like to actually run with that, and let's start talking about turning Commercial Street into a town square. Started meeting with these young folks, every 2 weeks having a potluck, and what I did, which was really unusual, was I did not have an agenda, like we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to move. It was really about the conversation. And what was most amazing is that they discovered over this whole course of year, with this town square, what was much more important than the pavers or the bench or the planter boxes was the conversation, was including everybody and actually looking at us historically. How did we get here? How did this town get here? What stories and what history has been left out from this narrative, right? Who is not included in the fold today from even yesterday? So we were looking at everything from the Chinese immigrants that were here, that were building our town. We were looking at the Nisenan, how they were obliterated in a matter of 10 years, right? And almost extinct until over the last few years they discovered they're still around, right? And they were looking at also at the sex trade during the mining era, the role of the women. And what we discovered was that before we start talking about the location of a town square, what it's going to look like, what the physical aspects are going to be of this, we actually really need to start talking to one another. And when we're talking about social media and Facebook and iPhones and things like that, we are so disconnected, we are so isolated that the most powerful thing and most radical act we can commit is to speak to one another face to face. It's a dying act. You barely see it in life. We have actually lost how to do that. So we had an event last week, a concert with the Polish ambassador. He raised $10,000. We had a panel with everything from the police chief to the Nisenan, Shelley Covert, who's here today, to architects, to homeless advocates, to business owners, and we started the conversation. And that $9,000 is now going to be applied to having the workshops and having the charrettes and doing the tours and actually continuing that conversation. And we hope you'll join us. So we ultimately realized what town squares are really about are not the benches, but the people and that face-to-face contact. Thank you so much.
So my next guest is here to talk to us about some resource management, which is so important. And one of our most valuable resources that we have here is the incredible forest that we are so lucky to be able to walk off into and to provides all of its benefits. So let me introduce to you David Fournier from the Forest Service. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Payam. Kind of feel like the universe is speaking to me here. It's a great energy in the room. And Renette, I don't know if you remember, you were one of the first people I met when I came to Nevada City a little over a year ago, actually a year and a half ago, Three Forks, yeah. And what can we do about the trees that are dying? And I happened to have just published a paper on the bark beetles in Lake Tahoe when we were talking. So we spoke for quite a bit longer than I have time for here today. But it is a matter of resilience, what those bark beetles represent. And just want to give a little bit of history, not to put everyone to sleep, but just where did the Forest Service come from? Why do we manage all this land? It's quite a bit. It's a big percentage of the state of California. It's 870 some odd thousand acres is the Tahoe National Forest alone. And we're broken into 4 districts: the Truckee District, the Yuba, the American River, and the Sierraville. So about 5 counties fall within the Tahoe. We were established in 1905, but actually we were a forest reserve before that, in large part because the first chief, Gifford Pinchot, realized that with westward expansion, we were just mowing it down. Nobody really knew what was left. And so the National Forest became a really big part of trying to protect these resources on the American landscape, not just in California, but the whole West. Of course, there was a lot of controversy. We're an agency that's always in the middle of controversy. Darshan and I were talking earlier about what I used to love about my job as a private consultant. About 30 years ago, I used to help individual landowners manage about 1,000 acres or less, but I was only walking the land with one person generally. The National Forest, we're walking the land with everyone. You all have a piece of this national treasure, and so it's exciting. It's exciting to me. I'm a forester. I've got quite a background in forestry, a few degrees, 27 years experience. But what's always amazing to me is that everyone brings their own set of values, their perceptions, and of course for me, I love to hear all of it because you are the landowner, and we're the stewards. So each and every person on the Tahoe, I've been so excited since I've gotten here because it's like wildlife biologists, hydrologists who manage the watershed, soil scientists, and engineers, and you name it. We all are working together to manage on the Tahoe on a watershed basis. I can't speak for how it was managed before I got here, but I know, we still have amazing places, so I know the folks that came before me have been managing this resource as best they could, given the tools that they have. What I really appreciate right now is that I always think in terms of, it's all about the people in the position at the time. So you have to always capitalize when you have someone who's really forward-thinking, and we have a forest supervisor who is very forward-thinking, Ellie Alano. He understands the science, and the Forest Service has a research branch, not just the National Forest branch, also international programs and state and private forestry. Of course, I work in the National Forest System. But in that system, the forest supervisor has quite a bit of leeway to set the agenda. And we've consciously decided to make the watershed the basis of our management. And so not just taking a geographic figure on the landscape, but integrating all the resources within it. So what you should be able to see in the near future, because this is a relatively new, not a new concept, but really actually new to actually do this, is to pull all the resource specialists together, plan our projects at a much bigger scale, and address the issues that are within those watersheds. What Shelley was talking about fire in the landscape, we've been missing it for 100 years. The trees you see around town are generally 85 to 120 years old. So that comes right on the heels of westward expansion. These are the new generation of trees, but they've missed that disturbance. And they've also missed the resilience that comes with fire continually being a player in how they develop. And typically, when the trees are this big, this is when you start seeing how they're going to progress into the mature, old-growth stage. Not at the stage we have now. We're working to restore some of that resilience by thinning that forest out the best we can with the resources we have. The thing about the Forest Service, we're relatively a small agency. It seems like, oh no, we're a big agency, 30,000 employees, but that's one office for a small company that might work at a much bigger scale. But we cover so much ground, and that's not a big enough number to really do the job justice. So we partner, and part of that building resilience in the landscape really comes from all the partners that we've engaged with. And my job here is I'm the Natural Resources Staff Officer, so I oversee the programs for wildlife, botany, timber, the watershed planning. It's a big staff. But one thing that we do very effectively, especially with watershed restoration, meadow restoration, is with partners like Circle and Sierra Nevada Conservancy, American Rivers, and the list goes on and on and on. We've expanded really our capacity 2 to 3 times. There is no way that you would see the kind of improvements in our Western Nevada County project, which runs along Deer Creek. Karen Hayden, the ranger on the Yuba District, was instrumental in what she calls her all-hands meetings. She holds them several times a year. Everyone's invited. And again, being a woman, maybe this is the thing. She listens. And how do we advance the needs in the community and address the real threat fire poses to our community? That area was largely an outshot of that group coming together and expressing what it was they wanted to see happen on the National Forest. So really kudos to her. And I think that's more and more where we're going to be as an agency. We can't rely on more funding coming in, so we are working effortlessly to get more and more partners on board. And so Steve Frisch is a good friend, SBC. We're still looking for ways, always, not just in the Tahoe, but in this whole Sierra region. And so one thing that's also happening, the Tahoe is part of Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative. So we're trying to leverage what we have along with the other national forests right in this area, the El Dorado and the Lake Tahoe Basin. So some of the major drainages that we all share cross these 3 forests. And so we're trying to develop strategies, plans that we could do together as opposed to just, what we do on our own national forest. So I did want to give my own ecological resilience definition here, and I have to ask for forgiveness because I did pull it out of the Dictionary of Forestry. But it has to do with the capacity of the ecosystem to return to the pre-disturbance condition, including its essential characteristics, functions, and diversity. So very much like Poyam's definition. And I think that's, it's an interesting way to present it. You go back to the way it was before. But in a way, you really don't. And with climate change, it's never going to be the same. And I think the thing that we try to build in proactively in our prescriptions and how we're treating the forest is that it can withstand some of these disturbances, whether it's fire, bark beetles, drought, wind events, things like that. The thing about climate change isn't that it's just this gradual change, it's more that it's these extremes. And so that's making it really challenging for us to figure out what is that condition that we need to get the forest to be resilient to these extremes. So I look forward to the conversation around that topic and others, and thank you so much.
So I'm going to introduce my next guest, but before I do that, there's a few things I wanted to mention. Out of this event, one of the things we'll be developing is a directory of people and resources who are working on some of these issues. And we'll continue to build that directory, but we'll be able to put it out so that if people are wondering, who's actively participating in this, they can go look there and see and find out who do they need to contact if they want to be involved or give access to that. Something else we're looking into is creating a space where we can sort of continue to do this kind of education and outreach. And one last thing I'd like to mention is that we'll be about 10, 15 more minutes, and then there'll be a potluck where you can come and get some food to eat, and there'll be a drum circle and some music, and so feel free to hang out, and then after that we'll come back in and we'll have a little discussion. If any of you want to ask questions, or the panel will have an option to be able to talk to each other, and we can talk about more of this. So let me introduce to you someone who has been involved. Renette mentioned the Yuba Village Building Convergence, which was a really great event, and they managed to engage so many people, and they got so many events going. It was really good for the community. So let me introduce to you Thomas Spellman, who is an instrumental part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Poyo. And I just, first of all, want to say this conversation, I think, is critically important. And thank you, Poyo, for organizing this, and for all of you who are here and participating. May we have much more of this conversation. My topic I was asked to talk about is engagement, community engagement. In thinking about a lot of the problems and in various groups I've been in where we've explored the various problems in the world, community itself is, to me, the word that most represents the solution. So, in one degree, community resiliency, community itself is the resiliency, and the more an actual experience that we have of community and more of the community bonds we have with each other, that actually is tangibly the solution and the resiliency that we're after. This event that Yuba Village produced, the Yuba Village Building Convergence, brought a lot of different people together. We participated in a lot of different ways in the community. One thing that really enabled that to happen and enabled so many different pieces to be involved was the degree to which there was a lot of autonomy of the people who were participating. It basically was, to some degree, an open invitation, like a village. There's no, in an actual village, there's no one really, telling people what to do, so much as people are pursuing their own individual excitement, their own individual paths of survival and service. And so in this event, we had about 8 months of organizing and planning, and it basically was largely composed of potlucks where we would get together purely for the sake of building community and connections, and then inviting people to participate in this event in various ways that they felt called to. And one of my biggest surprises when the event started was just how many different pieces and how many different aspects. It was actually like walking into a metaphorical village in some ways, because so many different people brought their own skills and interests and then created something. And that speaks to another thing about resiliency that I think is really important, is it depends on people putting their energy into what they care about and actually taking responsibility, personal responsibility. In our event, it was completely dependent on many people stepping up and being leaders of different projects. And every single one of those required each individual person to first of all care enough to do that and care enough to take on that personal responsibility. And then, some of the problems that we had were where people took quite a bit of liberty with that, where the autonomy went to a certain extreme and decisions were made without consulting with the group or the people who are most affected by that. And that, again, is a reflection of how important it is. The care and the taking responsibility isn't just, me doing my thing, but caring enough about those that we're influencing to make sure that the effect that we're having is for the best of the community. Which brings up an interesting topic of how do we know, what effect that we're having on our community. How do we know what that will be? One really, to me, most significant thing about Yuba Village, the organization, is that we have adopted a decision-making model called sociocracy, which is primarily about making sure that everyone who is affected by a decision has a voice in at least having the opportunity to object to that decision. Which doesn't necessarily mean that everyone gets to decide. It's different than maybe consensus where we think, oh, everybody in the room gets to, choose or participate in the color of, the paint on the wall. It's not necessarily that. There's still leadership. But it's this really important idea that in a decision that does matter, we actually reach out and make sure that we've heard from people. And when there is a problem, and like in our case, in our project, where there were negative reactions to a couple of the things that happened, in every single case, the problem was that not enough communication happened, not enough actually going out of our way, reaching out to people, double-checking, communicating. And that gets back to the communication piece. In all those situations, not enough effort and care was taken with communicating and making sure that everyone was heard from. Another piece of sociocracy is this idea, very closely related to that, of consent. That by doing things this way, we have this confidence that we have the consent of everyone that we're working with, which is a foundation of unity. Community is totally dependent on us all being in it together, and if every single person in the community being on board, so to speak, everyone consenting, in a sense, to what's going on in the community. If we have people who have serious objections to something going on in the community, it's super important that we reach out to them and find out what are those objections, what are the problems, because usually there is a problem that affects everybody happening there. If only a few people are speaking out about it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not affecting everybody. So this process of explicitly getting consent from everybody involved is a way to, bring out anything that might be a problem, which inevitably is a problem for everyone. If it's a problem for some, it's probably a problem for everybody. This conversation is also really wonderful to me on this day in particular, because today is the 200th anniversary of one of my spiritual teachers, Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith. And he basically dedicated his life to, and was imprisoned for the most of his life, for this very topic of unity, and but on a global scale, this overcoming racism, nationalism, all these really tremendously divisive problems that we're facing in our world. And so I think this conversation we're having today is a wonderful synchronicity with that, which I've been celebrating today. So engagement, one of the engagement to me also implies a long-term investment. It's not just about showing up and having a party, but is actually what will it look like a year from now? So one of the signs for me that our event was a success is 4 of the hands-on projects that we did have continued on after our festival. So the fact that Commercial Street is living on through a new project. We started a revitalization of a garden up by the jail, and so Kathy Irving, who was the conceiver of that, has been bringing inmates out to work in it every week since the event, and it's been tremendously revitalized, and more. So that to me is something to look for, is really having a long-term investment of care and responsibility. Thank you. There's so much to this topic, and I really wish that we continue this conversation as much as possible, so thank you.
So I'll introduce you to our last speaker. He's somebody you've met before, and he has done a lot around arts and culture, which is so critical for this subject. At first, you might hear that, and it doesn't seem that way, but it does so many things to connect these things together. It informs our culture, and it provides mental health benefits. There's so many benefits. So let me introduce him. Michael, you ready? Michael DiMartino, thank you.
Thank you. Nice round of applause for Payom, who put a lot of effort. So I sense the blood sugar in the room getting low. So I'm going to be very brief, and then we're going to finish actually with a presentation of dance by Shari Brookler, who is one of the people who helped organize, because again, I think all of us are aware that the arts is a very important economic driver in our community. And recently through Sunset Magazine and other publications, including Tahoe for outdoor recreation and winter sports, that we live in one of the most amazing small town areas, historic areas, and very forward-thinking areas in the country. So, like I said, I moved here from Santa Cruz to specifically find my niche here. Some of you might been to we do a weekly community drum circle where we get together with a group of 20, sometimes more people. We spend 2 hours doing nonverbal communication through rhythm, through creative self-expression. And out of this time together, meeting Payom and others, there's an amazing amount of humanistic connection and spiritual support that we've been able to find in each other. It really has become kind of like a little tribe or family of people, and that's been really something great that we've found has worked in the community. I'm also a performer, and even when I perform with some of my musical projects, it's not just about performing and entertaining. It's about bringing people together in the village, like Thomas was talking about, where everybody has a role. The arts was never something that was done as a spectator sport, right? It was always something that involved everybody. Even if you were watching, maybe you were dancing or participating musically, but it was something that brought our communities together and then opened up the doorway of opportunity for deeper discussion and discourse. And as you know, there's so many luminaries of arts and education in this area, ranging from, one of the original beat poets, Gary Snyder, to a whole generation of younger people that are now working with the idea of ecstatic dance and music and healing through the arts. That it's really an incredible time to be alive. And again, I want to just re-acknowledge, which is always important to me, because we can get up here and do 2 hours of talking heads, break some bread, and leave. And where does the energy go? So Payom had mentioned a couple things. We are starting a directory as of today with individuals and organizations. Next week we'll be in Mount Shasta, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to be working with some of the Winnemem people up there and other organizations. And then the week after that, Chico. So we're going to start a directory so people can get information. There was a lot of people we invited today that couldn't make it. I had spoke to Patty at the Emergency Preparedness Office, and of course they're dealing with a lot of things right now. But we want to have her come and speak so this content can be shared. A lot of people in time of an emergency don't have the understanding or the knowledge or the resources of what to do. And recently, paradoxically enough, the emergency responders meeting and emergency preparedness meeting was about 3 days before the fire started. Guess how many people showed up? And then 3 days later, we had the fire. So I got goosebumps because this is something, it's really pertinent. And I don't want to just focus on, like, if there's a fire or a catastrophe, what do we do? But really just the idea of quality of life. And like Thomas was mentioning, how to weave our community together in an even more profound, fulfilling ways. We have social media, we have digital technology. It's brought us closer together, but in a way, it's also alienated us. And I can tell you, as far as doing a weekly 2-hour radio and TV show, that a lot of time gets invested into technology where we're not doing this. We're not looking at each other. We're not shaking hands. We're not embracing each other, because we have more emails to deal with, and I have to post to Facebook, and I want to see what my friend is eating for breakfast. I mean, there's so many things that command our attention. But as Thomas had spoken to, and Renette through decades of her effortless work, and really the path that has been set to us by the indigenous community, it's time to really bring our ideas and to rehumanize ourselves and to elevate to really a new paradigm of how we look at each other, how we look at community. Another exciting thing is because Nevada County is really, I think, a beacon for the world. And I've traveled fairly extensively. I'm an interfaith minister. I very much, like Thomas was talking about, the Baha'i tradition, believe in many religions, but there's really one human family and one kind of mega spirit energy entity that connects us all, regardless of what you call it or what you believe. So over the last 25 years, I've produced events in Egypt at the Great Pyramids. We've produced events in Morocco. We've done stuff in Brazil. I've been very involved with the Hopi and the Dene cause out at the Big Mountain area, and spent many years actually living out there very simply to show my sincerity about my commitment to the indigenous community, because they have a lot of knowledge and a lot to offer us too. And it brings us again to contemporary society, like having our representative from the Forest Service. How can we build these bridges? So today we organize this event as the first effort to not only build bridges, which is happening every day, and that's what makes this community amazing, but to be able to archive some of this content, to develop a library, and to be able to broadcast it for people who maybe they couldn't make it today, and maybe they've never heard the term resilient, and maybe they're not interested until there's a fire in their backyard or one of these other crises come up. But we started today. We're going to be doing this as an ongoing forum for the community, and I'm really happy and thankful for NCTV and the Digital Media Center for their support. And this is our new epicenter of media here in Nevada County, along with KVMR. So I want to encourage you all, be inspired, use it. Let your voice be heard. Everybody has something to say and contribute. There's no silent bystanders anymore. Everyone has something valid to offer. We also invited some holistic practitioners who will be coming in the future, talking to us about things we can do for our own self-care. So on that, the last thing I want to say is we've been in discussion, and it's kind of exciting that we're really focused. I met with Gary Tintle last week in regards to the Alpha building and other property owners about actually starting a community resiliency education center, where it would be a place like this where all of the organizations, and like Thomas said with Sociocracy, that people can come and share their gifts and their knowledge, but it has a very specific mission and intention and focus. So we're actually working on that. I now have a commitment from the founder of the Green Festival, Kevin Donaher, who will be coming and joining us over the next couple months. They're starting a whole center in Quincy. They're turning an old school building into a resiliency education center where kids can be doing permaculture, and there can be events and fundraisers. It's really exciting. Next weekend in Shasta, we have a gentleman from Palo Alto who they just bought 250 acres in Mount Shasta area, where they're going to be doing all sorts of events and working with the land and agriculture. So this is not a new idea. We're not the only ones doing it, and we're just trying to build bridges to the people in our community and also to the people in the region, really the watershed for 85% of California, to become more aware about some of these issues. So that'll about do it for me. We're going to have Sherry get ready for her dance performance, because, again, we all enjoy arts. Then we're going to have a potluck. We're going to have some music with Gabrielle Lawson. And we also have another person we wanted to showcase today. We have a local DJ who has a DJ school here, who's part of hip-hop medicine, because they realize the important impact that hip-hop has on today's youth and culture around the world. But their commitment is bringing conscious, enlightened lyrical content, not talking about bling and how many how great your tires are, what kind of car you have, or these other types of subjects that have become so much part of mainstream popular culture. So DJ Power will be playing some music. We'll have a little bit of some nonverbal communication through drumming, and then we'll be back with a short panel where you can ask questions, because we want to get your ideas today. We want to start looking at all these different facets. So again, thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Michael Logue, who's here. He's helping with the sound. Thank you, Jim Heck, for tolerating 14 months of being the tech guy for the Golden Road TV show. And the last thing I want to say is we're looking now at Earth Day, because we're working with some people who work with, like Jeff Bezos from Amazon and Apple and other people, and there's a lot of resources and funding for communities to do resiliency education and awareness. It goes to things like STEAM, you might have heard of that, and other things. So it's really exciting, because the more organized and more we build these bridges, the more potential, the more opportunity, and the more we can elevate our community to its highest potential. And really, as I believe, maybe I'm a little naive, to be a beacon for the world about how people can live together. And I think we all experience that every day here in Nevada County. So thank you so much. And we'll see everybody in a minute, and we'll enjoy some great food. So thank you.